Sevaya Narayana Narayana Namah. What was it? Naronchaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayat Mudirahet Nasta Praheshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevya Bhagavate Uttama Sloke Bhakti Bhavati Naistiki. Reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 13, text number 5. This chapter is titled Nature, the Enjoyer and Consciousness. Rishi bhi bahuda gitam chando bhi vividhay prithak brahma sutra padhai chaiva hetu ma'adbhi vinishchitahai. Rishi bhi bahuda gitam chando bhi vividhay prithak brahma sutra padhai chaiva hetu ma'adbhi vinishchitai. Rishi bhi bahuda gitam Chando bhi vividhay prithak Brahma sutra padhai chaiva hetu ma'adbhi vinishchitai. If anybody else would like to say?
Rishi, are you able to hear me, Prabhu?
Yeah.
Rishi bhir bauda gitam chando bir vivida pratak Brahma sutra padhai shaiva hetumat bir vinishchitai.
Anybody else? Okay. Word by word.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, can I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Can I? Yeah. Rushi bhir bahuda gitam chando bhir vividhay prathak Brahma sutra padaischaiva hetum bhakti vinishchitai.
Rishi B by the wise sages. Bahuda, in many ways, Gita described Chandobihi by Vedic hymns, Vividhai, various, Pitak, variously, Brahma Sutra of the Vedanta, Padai by the aphorisms. Cha also, Eva certainly, Hetuma Adbihi with cause and effect. Vinishchitai, certain. Translation purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Prabhupada ki. Yeah. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, is the highest authority in explaining this knowledge. Still, as a matter of course, learned scholars and standard authorities always give evidence from previous authorities. Krishna is explaining this most controversial point regarding the duality and non-duality of the soul and the supersoul by referring to a scripture, the Vedanta, which is accepted as authority. First he says, this is according to different sages. As far as the sages are concerned, besides himself, Vyasdev, the author of the Vedanta Sutra, is a great sage. And in the Vedanta Sutra, duality is perfectly explained. And Vyasdeva's father, Parashara, is also a great sage. And he writes in his books of religiosity, Aham Tvam Cha Tathanye, we means you and you, I, and the various other living entities are all transcendental, although in material bodies. Now we have fallen into the ways of the three modes of material nature, according to our different karma. As such, some are on higher levels and some are in the lower nature. The higher and lower natures exist due to ignorance and are being manifested in an infinite number of living entities. But the super soul, which is infallible, is uncontaminated by the three qualities of nature and is transcendental. Similarly, in the original Vedas, a distinction between the soul, the super soul, and the body is made, especially in the Katha Upanishad. There are many great sages who explain this, and Parasara is considered principal among them. The word Chandobihi refers to the various Vedic literatures. The Taittiriya Upanishad, for example, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, describes nature, the living entity, and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As stated before, Kshetra is the field of activities, and there are two kinds of Kshetragya: the individual living entity and the Supreme Living Entity. As stated in the Taittiriya Upanishad, Brahma Pucham Pratishtha, there is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy. Right? There is a manifestation of the Supreme Lord's energy known as Annamaya, dependence upon food for existence. This is a materialistic realization of the absolute truth. This is a materialistic realization of the Supreme. Then in Pranamaya, after realizing the Supreme Absolute Truth in food, one can realize the Absolute Truth in the living symptoms or life forms. In Jnanamaya, realization extends beyond the living symptoms to the point of thinking, feeling, and willing. Then there is Brahman realization called Vijnanamaya, in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity himself. The next and supreme stage is Anandamaya, realization of the all blissful nature. Thus, there are 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahmapucham. Out of these, the first 3, Annamaya, Pranamaya, and Jnanamaya, involve the fields of activities of the living entities. Transcendental to all these fields of activities is the Supreme Lord, who is called Anandamaya. The Vedanta Sutra also describes the Supreme by saying Anandamaya Abhyasat. The Supreme Personality of Godhead is by nature full of joy. To enjoy his transcendental bliss, he expands into Vijnanamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, and Annamaya. In the field of activities, the living entity is considered to be the enjoyer. And different from him is the Anandamaya. That means that if the living entity decides to enjoy indulging himself with the Anandamaya, then he becomes perfect. This is the real picture of the Supreme Lord as a supreme knower of the field, the living entity as a subordinate knower, and the nature of the field of activities. One has to search for this truth in the Vedanta Sutra or Brahma Sutra. It is mentioned here that the codes of the Brahma Sutra are very nicely arranged according to cause and effect. Some of the sutras or aphorisms are Na Vyadasrutehe Na Atma Shrutehe and Parattu Tat Shrutehe. The first aphorism indicates the fields of activities, the second indicates the living entity, and the third indicates the Supreme Lord, the Samam Bonam among all the manifestations of various entities. Om Agnanatiminandasya Gyananjana Salakaya Chakshurmitan Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manabhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadhamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shigaro Sijita Padakamalam Shigaram Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sagana Raghunathavitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Pariyana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakha Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namastate Sapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaivacha Patitanam Pavanebhayo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ramo 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 Hare Hare Rishi Bhi Bahudha Gitam Chando Bhi Vividhai Pitak Brahma Sutra Padai Chaiva Hetuma Adbhi Vinischitahi. That knowledge of the field of activities and of the knower of activities is described by various sages in various Vedic literatures and various Vedic writings. It is especially presented in Vedanta Sutra with all reasoning as to cause and effect. So it's a nice section, nice words of Bhagavad Gita. We see we are here in the 13th chapter. The first 6th chapter talks about the process of bhakti performed by performing prescribed duties of karma, also called karma yoga. Then the middle 6 chapters, 7th chapter to the 12th chapter, describes directly about bhakti. And the last 6 chapters describes, can you hold on for one moment, there's a call coming, 1 minute. Yeah. The last 6 chapters, chapters 13 to 18, talks about process of bhakti performed by performance of philosophical understanding of jnana, also known as jnana yoga. And we see bhakti is in the middle because it supports both karma and jnana. Right. By itself, karma and jnana has nothing. There's no substance. Unless it is doted to perform bhakti. Right. So, in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, we see completely the chapter is started devotional service, different levels of bhakti. And Krishna describes in detail about pure devotional service. If you cannot perform that, you do this. If you cannot perform that, you do this. Right. And we see in the 12th chapter, 7th verse, right, there is a place where it talks about what is the connection between the bhakti section, the jnana section, right, where Lord Krishna talks about saving his devotees from the path of birth and death, right, and the beginning of this 13th chapter, we see Arjuna is asking 6 questions, right. So in the first section, from 13.1 to 13.7, Krishna explains the field of activities, more known as Kshetra, and the knower of the field, Kshetragya. The 6 questions Arjuna is asking is about Prakriti, material nature, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetragya, Jnana, and Gneyam, the object of knowledge. Kshetragya is the entity which experiences the field of actions or the knower of the field. Kshetra is the field of activities. Jnana is the knowledge or the process of acquiring knowledge, right? And Gaya is the object of knowledge. So in these particular words, we see Lord Krishna describing about he himself is a supreme authority, right? He himself is the supreme authority, but still he says, okay, further it is substantiated by great scripture, by saintly persons, sadhu, and by Shastra, right? Something can be, it's mentioned that we can accept something if it is accepted by sadhu, Shastra, and Guru. Otherwise, spiritual truth, right, spiritual knowledge, if it's not in conjunction with sadhu, Shastra, and Guru, it cannot be accepted, right? So, here in these words, Lord Krishna mentions about giving evidence from past authorities that Vyasadeva accepted this, especially this concept about duality and non-duality, right? Duality and non-duality. So what does duality and non-duality mean? Right. The impersonal conception is everything is one, right? Impersonal conception is everything is one, right? Brahma Satya, Jagat Mithya. Everything is one. But the personal conception talks about there is a soul, The soul is encaged in this material body, right? Coming under the influence of the three modes of material nature, it is performing activities. So the soul, the living entity, is also, right, is also a knower, but it's a partial knower. While there is super soul, the soul and super soul are not non-dual or one. It's duality, two different. Qualitatively same, quantitatively different. And that's Paramatma. Right. So Vyasadeva accepts that in the Vedanta Sutra. What is Vedanta? There are Vedas. And the conclusion of all the Vedas is Vedanta. Right. The essence of all the Vedas is also expressed in Upanishads. Right. The conclusion of all the Vedas is Vedanta. And the sutra or the codes or the padas which explain this Vedanta, the ultimate conclusion of the Vedas, is called Vedanta Sutra. Right. So he explains the concept of duality in quite detail in Vedanta Sutras. Right. And then Parasar Muni, Vyasadeva's father, right, also a great sage, he writes in his book of religiosity about Aham Tvam Cha Tatanya, where you, I, and all the living entities are transcendental, although in material bodies. Right? Because the soul, right, though it is engaged in the material body, it is Satchidananda. Satchidananda. Full of eternality, full of knowledge, and full of bliss. But because it is identifying itself with the body, it understands its real position. Right. But the super soul, it does not lose its position. The super soul is infallible and transcendental. Right. The super soul is infallible, Paramatma, and transcendental. So we are the soul, we are the super soul. The soul being engaged, coming under the influence of the three modes of material nature, performing the through the soul is performing the activities, and the super soul is the witnesser of the activities. The Katha Upanishad clearly establishes the distinction between the soul, the super soul, and the body. Right. So further, on the Brahman realization, right, we see the Shastra mentioning about Brahma Pucham Pratishta from Taittiriya Upanishad. Brahma Pucham Pratishta. That Brahman realization, the Brahman Tattva, is expressed through these 5 stages of knowledge. Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. The Annamaya is the supreme object of realization. Food is the supreme object of realization in the Annamaya stage. Right? Same way, pranamaya. After realizing the food, it comes to the stage of pranamaya where he realizes different living symptoms or life forms. In the jnanamaya stage, he starts thinking, feeling, and willing, and he starts appreciating the interactions of mind and intelligence. Vijnanamaya stage is a realization in which the living entity's mind and life symptoms are distinguished from the living entity itself. And Anandamaya, the supreme stage of realization of all blissful nature. Right. So the question 3 and 4 about Kshetra and Kshetragya, right, is answered here to some extent by the Supreme Lord. Where Kshetra, which is a field of activities, includes the gross body and the subtle body, right? The gross body deals mostly with the Annamaya and Pranamaya, form of Brahman. While the subtle body deals with the Vijnanamaya, or no, it deals with the Jnanamaya. That's all. While Kshetragya, the knower of the field of activity, is the individual soul and the super soul. So that stages of Brahman realization is the Vijnanamaya and Anandamaya. Where the Shastra says Anandamaya Abhyasat, right? Ultimately, the Lord is full of eternal, fully blissful. Anandamaya Abhyasat, right? When we come to that Anandamaya stage, we're directly thinking about the Supreme Lord and his activities. Right. So that's that is Supreme Personality of Godhead, Parmeshwar, or means the who is the regulator of everything, the witnesser, and the original knower of activity, the Kshetragya. Right. So that's how these particular words, Srila Prabhupada nicely explains that in his purport of Kshetra and Kshetragya. Now these 5 stages, that Brahma Pucham, where, let's see, yeah, Brahma Pucham Pratishtaha, the Brahman realization is further divided into these 5 stages: Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. 5 stages of Brahman realization, which are called Brahma Pucham. Yep. Okay. Are there any questions? This is quite deep in philosophical realization, and we can further discuss in sharing their realization in question answer form. Any questions, discussions, or somebody would like to throw some light into these wonderful words? Others are also allowed to ask questions. Amritaran Prabhu is not here today. We just don't have to wait for Amritaran Prabhu to ask questions. Haribol. We're discussing about the philosophy. Everybody fall asleep.
Haribol Madhupati Prabhu.
Jai. Haribol.
Jai, Jai. If nobody has a question regarding this topic of that discussion that we're doing today, can I ask you that question that I was asking in the morning?
Okay. Well, well, that question was more for Mataji, right? Where that section.
Yeah, I never heard that. Did you hear anything like that, Prabhuji?
No, I've not heard about it, but I'm sure Mataji must have done research.
Right, right. Okay, so I thought maybe you know something.
No, Ramayana is a deep literature.
Right.
So she found out more about Kaikai and mantra from the childhood form. So that's good. So yeah, so each and everything has a meaning. It just doesn't happen by chance. That like king like Dasharatha Maharaj has to go through a curse, right? And then we have heard about where that curse comes from, right? Shravan, the instance of Shravan. Similarly, no? Lord Ramachandra. So much, that's why it's Maryada Purushottam, an ideal. He establishes ideal, it's ideal behavior, ideal husband, it's ideal king, ideal son, so many ideal brother, so many different relationships. And he shows us that we cannot just have a blame game of, okay, because of Kai this happened, or because of mantra this happened. That was the point which Mataji made in morning's class by that example which you quoted about Kai from her childhood and mantra, right? We can discuss on this topic because this topic is quite deep about Kshetra and Kshetragya, the knower and the field of activities and the knower of the activities. There's 5 stages of Brahman realization. Good. So, but let Mataji come back to answer your question about where that reference which he quoted comes from.
No problem, Prabhuji. Yeah, Haribol, Hare Krishna.
Okay. Anything else? We see these 5, the 6 questions. which Arjuna is asking. It's quite in detail explained throughout the chapter. So all the verses we'll see, there'll be a lot of philosophy in the verses because again, this is the philosophical knowledge section of Bhagavad Gita, Jnana Yoga, which ultimately meant to perform bhakti. So it's supported by bhakti. So here also we see bhakti is to ultimately know the Supreme Lord, Geyam, the object of knowledge. Right? We talk about jnana, knowledge. But what is the use of that knowledge? To know the object of knowledge, Geyam. And while knowing that, we understand about Prakriti, Purusha, Kshetra, Kshetrajya, right? And the last two, Jnanam and Geyam. So it's quite detailed explain, and more we discuss this, more we'll get out of it. Yeah. Anybody else would like to share some light on this? Really? Yeah. Let's see what else can we share in this verse. Aham Tvam Chatatangye. Parasamuni talks about you, Aham, Zai, Tvam, you and the various other living entities. Chatatanye, various other living entities are all transcendental, all the material bodies. And then Taittiriya Upanishad, which is a branch of the Yajurveda, which describes the nature of the living entity and the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Especially this Brahma Pucham, or these 5 stages of Brahman realization, quite deep. Annamaya, Pranamaya, Jnanamaya, Vijnanamaya, and Anandamaya. Elsewhere, they also described as the 5 Purushas, where Annamaya is, Purusha is always conscious of the food, Pranamaya is conscious of the life, Jnanamaya is conscious of Atma Tattva, Vijnanamaya is conscious of practical service to Krishna only, and Anandamaya being conscious of blissful Radha Krishna Seva only, the Seva only. Where the first 3 represents the Kshetra or the material body, and the different from them is the Vijnanamaya Purusha. The Jiva, who is a knower of the body, and as we discussed earlier, is a partial knower of the body and the Paramatma is the full knower, the super soul, Antaryami is the full knower of the body. And they are distinct from each other. That's why the duality concept is there. Yeah. Okay. Haribo. Dattata Prabhu is here. Haribo. Shimesha Prabhu, anything else?
Hare Krishna, Dandavat Pranam always to Srila
No
Prabhupada.
problem. Dattata Prabhu. Would you like to share something?
No, it's all complete. Yeah, very, very deep text, this one, actually. Deep philosophy is there.
Gordon Bhakta Prabhu was there. He left. I don't know. Yeah. Yeah, it's deep.
Yeah,
Directly from Bhakti, we
Yeah.
get into Jnana, which has all this deeper understanding, but ultimately coming to the platform of Bhakti. That's why Bhavanam Janmanante Jnanavan Mam Prapadate. After many, many lifetimes, this Jnani come to the platform that ultimately everything is coming from Vasudeva. Vasudevam Sarvamiti Sa Mahatma Dullabha. But so that we don't sentimentally perform, this knowledge is also important. Knowledge of the Absolute, which before understanding the Absolute, we also understand Jiva, also understand Prakriti. Right? So, yeah, it's all important. Thank you. Shimesha Prabhu, you had something? Or he's on his way to the Bhakti Viksha, or already in the Bhakti Viksha? Okay. If there are no discussion, we will end here.
How is the health of the Maharaj? Kodamukana Maharaj? Do you know that latest?
Blissful serving in Krishna consciousness.
Yeah.
I don't know, I just completely unbothered by these. Yeah.
Sorry, I was a bit away.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful topic. On the sentimental level, Srila Prabhupada said that religion without philosophy is a sentiment,
Mm.
and philosophy without religion is a mental
Mental
speculation.
speculation. Yeah.
So it's this chapter onwards, Jnana Yoga,
Mm.
bring that wonderful understanding that both knowledge and the religion, that the Krishna consciousness should go hand in hand. So that makes absolute, that makes perfect,
Yeah.
put it us in a perfect devotional platform. Very
Mhm.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yeah. Dattatreya Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
All Krishna Srila Prabhupada.
You reach
One,
safely to
sorry,
Oklahoma
Prabhuji.
land.
Oh, yeah.
Dattatreya Prabhu, did you reach safely to Oklahoma land?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Prabhuji, are you free to take class on Monday? Dattatreya Prabhu,
Sorry, Prabhuji.
are you free to take class on Monday?
Coming Monday?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the next verse. Actually, that's a verse together, 6 and 7.
Oh, 6 and 7. But this verse is very, very philosophical
Very deep,
verse.
yes. Wonderful. And
Very deep.
the Prabhu has mentioned Brahma Pucha, that itself is a deep subject matter.
Yeah. Yes.
So go into much more deeper subject matter and discuss 6th and 7th,
Yeah.
Yeah.
where Kshetra, further we will talk about Kshetra and Kshetragya, the knower of the field and the field of activity.
Yeah.
Knowledge and the object of knowledge. So wonderful.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is the basic, this is the foundation of and our understanding.
Yeah.
The foundation. We develop everything from these 6, aspect, 6 factors.
Good. Okay. So we
This
will
is
end
the
here.
Gnana joke.
Vancha kalpatarubhascha kripa
Sindhabhevacha patitanam
Pavane
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Vaishnavavrinda
Vaishnavinda ki
Jai.
Srimad
Prabhupada ki
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Nanda Kodi Vaishnavavrinda ki jai.
Jai.
Gaura Premanande.
Hari 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 Bol. Thank you, everybody. Hari Bol.
Thank you,
Hare
Madhupati.
Krishna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.